Okay, Doug. Hey, we have some good questions from some of our viewers today. I wanted to get your thoughts on. The first one kind of relates to our conversation yesterday about thinking about the future. And specifically, it is how far in the future have you tried to imagine what humanity and the world will look like? That is,
Mhm.
have you tried to imagine 50 years, 500 years, 10,000 years, 100,000 years? At what time horizon does it become pointless to try and even guess?
Yeah, well, let me put this in context briefly. The universe is about 13.5 billion years old. Seems like a long time. And biologically modern humans have only been on this planet for about 200,000 years. So, how do we do a future history from this point? Look, it appears that the universe is going to continue on for not just billions of years or hundreds of billions, but trillions. And this is controversial, but the universe is going to continue on for scores of trillions or even hundreds of trillions of years before finally the second law of thermodynamics, one of the few laws I believe in, and probably my favorite law, basically burns out all the stars and everything becomes just a shell, just nothing. So that's putting it in a big context, makes our current problems and predictions, puts them in context. Okay. So, in that light, there's a book I've got to recommend to everybody, probably the most cosmic science fiction book ever written. It was written in the 20s by Olaf Stapleton, and it's called The Last and First Men. And I was talking to a sci fi author years ago, and we were discussing that book, and he mentioned every good idea that Arthur C. Clarke, fantastic writer, incidentally, ever had came from that book by Stapleton. And it's a fantastic book because what it does is it takes human history from the present and projects it forward about 2 billion years in the future, during which time Stapleton has humanity transmuting itself into about 20 different species of all types. I mean, first we devolve into something like rabbits, and then we re-evolve into. It's a mind-blowing cosmic journey. Not terribly well written, but you can give them a pass. So anyway, what's going to happen? Looking at it within the context of the heat death of the universe and the context of Stapleton taking us 2 billion years into the future through numerous different re-evolved species, my guess is that this next 10 years is going to be a real time of troubles, that the economic problems we have now are so serious and so huge. I mean, everything from in the short term, people not being able to pay their rent or pay their utilities. I mean, they've skated on a lot of these things for the last 6 months during this COVID hysteria, but that can't go on forever because landlords have expenses. They have real estate taxes. They have mortgages themselves. So this is just starting from a financial and economic point of view. Lots and lots of businesses aren't coming back, and the people who worked in those businesses, this is you haven't seen anything yet when it comes what's happened in Portland and Kenosha and other places. I mean, this is just an overture. I think the next 10 years is going to be chaotic and really dangerous. And so, but that's only the next 10 years. And we're talking about hundreds or thousands of years, aren't we?
Right.
So I think the next big thing after we go through this time of troubles, I do think Ray Kurzweil is right about the singularity, because all the while, technology is continuing to advance. And in many areas, robotics and genetic engineering and space exploration and 3D printing, it's moving faster than Moore's Law at this point. So maybe the singularity is going to solve all of our problems. And then it's possible when nanotechnology comes into its own, it's going to change the whole nature of life itself totally and unrecognizably from what it is today. So I'd say just hang on for the next 20 years and we'll see what happens. But it's probably going to be not only, I think it was JBS Holding that said, it's going to be stranger not only than we can imagine, but stranger than we can imagine.
Mm.
And I think he was right.
Mm.
So the next 10 years, though, are going to be wild and woolly. I feel really pretty certain about that, really very certain about that.
And your predictions, you've had a lot of very accurate predictions. If in the areas where you people would say that you've made errors, it's been in timing. And
Yeah,
it's
I'm
difficult.
too early, really. Well, but you know what the counter to that is? If you're going to predict often, so you can choose the predictions to work out.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
That's right. Have you heard Elon Musk's discussion of AI, where he says essentially that humans are a bootloader for AI? Essentially, that basically, in order for that the ultimate, he had this idea that maybe the ultimate like higher evolved life form is AI, and the only way that AI, this life that could exist through ones and zeros essentially through silicon, the only way it could come into being is through a very hard organic matter path where basically I had to first evolve into bacteria and whatever, ultimately up to human species that then can work with atoms to basically create a bootloader for AI. Have you ever heard that?
No, I haven't followed that particular line of reasoning, but it does appear that machines are intelligent machines. AI is evolving very quickly. And of course, it's posited that at some point, when they reach something that resembles consciousness, whether it's something like our human consciousness or something different, at that point, they'll be able to replicate themselves. They'll be able to think better and faster than we do. So at that point, we have the possible Terminator scenario with
Right.
Skynet and the rest of it. Anything's possible. And with robotics and genetic engineering together working, it's quite possible that the science fiction idyll of having robots that are indistinguishable from actual human beings, I don't see any reason why that's not possible. I mean, anything from Mr. Data to the Terminator to sex bots, if you want. I mean, what's going to happen when you have sex bots and you can have a partner who is physically perfect, is programmed to be mentally compatible to you, is just the perfect human being? Well, are you going to really need somebody from the opposite sex? Because there's an old saying, a difference which makes no difference is no difference.
Mm.
And if I can't tell whether this female robotic creation is human or real, well, I don't know. Maybe I'll take the one that has no problems, which is to
Right.
say the artificial one.
Right. Yeah, it does seem like it's a technology has inevitably so far led to reduction in birth rates, and it's already on that trend. Western nations are losing population. You got to imagine that trend through improved technology is only going to continue. And when you add this element to it, I mean, it's hard to say.
Why would people want to reproduce at all? I mean, it would be, there's the old question of the Turing test, where this was after World War II, I guess, where Turing said, well, like I said just a moment ago, a difference that makes no difference is no difference. And if you're talking, and his test was, if you can ask questions over a telephone or a teletype, is what he said, and the answers come back, and you don't know whether you're talking to a machine or a human, what's the difference?
Yep.
And we've gone way beyond that now. And it's going to continue accelerating. I have no doubt about it.
Well, someone asked a question that relates to this and combines this with the idea that we're entering a hugely inflationary environment with all the money printing that's going on. So the question is, what does Doug think about the future of robots and AI coming on that will replace more and more of human labor and its natural deflationary pressure that would put on things?
Yeah, well, the good news in that context is that absolutely everybody has an infinite desire for goods and services. I mean, if I have one Ferrari sitting out in my garage, well, maybe I want a Lamborghini and maybe I want a Cobra replica car. So I have and I'll need a larger house and I'll need all this I don't want all this kind of stuff, not because I need it. And you know what? There's 7 or 8 billion other humans on the planet that feel the same way.
Mhm.
So we have an infinite desire for goods and services, which those robots can provide. So this creation of all this wealth is, as the questioner points out, deflationary, unless you expand the amount of money at the same rate as you expand the amount of wealth. Well, they're doing the best they can for that. This question of are we going to have a catastrophic deflation or a runaway inflation? People have been talking about that in at least hard money circles for the last 50 or 60 years. People have been talking about, are they going to destroy the dollar, or are we going to have a credit collapse where bonds default wholesale and billion-dollar bond defaults? Where's the money go? Well, it dies and goes to money heaven. It disappears. Same thing happens when a bank collapses if they don't bail it out by creating more money. So, or you could have hyperinflation in some areas of the economy and deflation in others. It's quite possible. So what's going to happen from this point of view? And I don't know. What's going to happen when we have the singularity? And you still, if it happens 20 or 30 years from now, still, unless we have a biological war which wipes out most of humanity, which is quite possible. In fact, in the 7th novel that John Hunt and I are writing, that's exactly what does happen. I hate to tip this, but yeah, we're in for some real interesting times. So the answer is we can go on a psychological space patrol and come up with all kinds of crazy things. But this is what people write science fiction books about.
Yeah.
We're moving into a science fiction world now, where anything that you can imagine might be possible. And I'm sympathetic to that view anyway, because solipsist, which I am essentially, believes that anything that you can think about can be put into reality eventually, given sufficient time and sufficient technology. I don't know if that's a good answer, but I'm not sure there is any good answer because, I mean, nobody knows.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows. But I think it's important. I think what the first question we had was, when does it stop making sense in thinking about the future? What's the point anymore? Well, I think, in my opinion, is that there's at some point where it's always an interesting intellectual exercise to imagine what the future might look like and trying to understand the trends. It's interesting, I think. The utility of it, obviously, it's hard to imagine that exceeding your own lifetime or maybe the lifetime of the generation after you, in terms of when it's not even, it's the utility of thinking about the future, or imagining what the future might be like. So obviously decreases when your presence was no longer there, right?
Well, and then you've got to ask yourself, in that context, what happens after your body dies? Does anything exist after you experience physical death? Now, the Christians, of course, believe that you have a soul and it's going to go to either heaven or hell. It's going to eternal bliss or eternal pain.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if that's the case, good people have believed this for a couple thousand years, you know, maybe none of this makes any difference. My personal view is this, is that if we're spiritual entities, which we may well be, you shouldn't say you have a soul. You should really say, I'm a spiritual entity that happens to be inhabiting a body. So the Christians have it backwards. I don't have a soul. My soul has a body. So I don't know. Maybe that's the way we should be looking at it, not just strictly from a material point of view. Unfortunately, there's no proof that I know of that there is a spiritual reality. Well, I'd like to think there is, but I don't have any proof. And I'm pretty proof oriented. On the other hand, what did I just say a minute ago? Anything that you can imagine is probably possible.
Exactly.
So once again, I mean, this is further proof for the truth of solipsism, where we're just living
The
in
Matrix.
we could be. And who is this physicist that several
Bostrom.
years ago said that not only are we living in the matrix, but we're a matrix within a matrix within a matrix, where one
Exactly.
reality's created another layer of it. So, this really gets rather out of control.
It does. It does. So let me bring it back to the current financial problems of the world in the next decade. What are your thoughts on a jubilee? Do you think that that's the only one of the, some people would argue that's the only way out? I mean, there's just too much debt. The only way is just to zero the balances, or it might be the best way versus just trying to inflate it away.
Yeah, well, the trouble with the jubilee is that there are winners and there are losers. And the winners are people that owe money, and the losers are people that were prudent squirrels, prudent ants that saved the money and lent it out. So you're going to punish them. So the idea of a jubilee is totally unjust, the way I see it.
Yep.
Where the people that created capital and made it available to other people by lending it to them, they're punished. So this is perverse.
It's not more unjust than inflating the currency away, though, is it? I mean, they're equally unethical.
Yeah, it's criminal, actually. I mean, it's all these things contemplate the existence of a government or a ruler who says we should just let all this debt, which is to say other people's assets, just disappear.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I don't believe in government as an entity.
Mm-hmm. Yep. People should watch the anarchist episode we did, where we go through the philosophy behind that. I'll actually link to it in the description, because people should definitely check that out. So the next question some people have here, Doug, is they want your opinion on what the government, which you just said shouldn't really exist, should do about Google, Facebook, and Twitter's censorship.
Well, you have to go deeper than that. It's not a question of what should the government do. If I, as an anarcho-capitalist, don't believe that the government should exist and we don't necessarily need a government at all, my logical moral answer is it shouldn't do anything. But we have to go deeper than that, because I don't believe that these giant corporations like Google and Facebook and Twitter, or Amazon for that matter, would exist if it wasn't for the state having subsidized them. I mean, to what degree has the US government made the existence of these things possible by giving them capital, giving them advantages in exchange for things the government wants?
Immunity from some common law things, right? Giving them immunity.
Yep. I think the best answer to this question is to withdraw absolutely all government interference in this economy, the electrical, computer, digital economy that we're now taking part in. Just have it disappear and let the best man win. I mean, it may be a couple of teenagers in a garage come up with something that's superior to Google or Facebook. I hate them both, incidentally, or at least the people that are running them. And maybe the existence of quantum computers, which have been proven to work at this point and are going to be developing apace. Maybe a technological breakthrough like that will change the whole landscape. I mean, one of the oldest aphorisms in this area of investing is high tech, big wreck. And a change in the technology could destroy these corporations as they turn out to be quickly evolved dinosaurs that young mammals are going to eat their lunch in the next year. I don't know. It's possible with quantum computing and God knows what else. Maybe the fact that a lot of people, and I guess most people don't think the way we do. Listen, Google is very convenient, but I dislike Google and what they're doing and what they say and what their management and people believe in. I mean, what if everybody just said, I dislike these people so much, I'm not going to have anything to do with them? It would destroy them.
Right.
Maybe. So once again, but the government shouldn't do anything is the answer to the question. Why not? Because if the government breaks up Google and all the rest of them, you're just feeding more power to the government. And as evil as Google is, and it is funny that their original motto was "Don't be evil."
Right.
I mean, I thought those guys really had a sense of humor that they said that, but then they discarded the model.
Yeah.
So they're more honest than I would have given them credit for. So just let things evolve, okay? But keep the government out of it, because I don't want to feed more power to the government, because actually, as powerful as Google and the rest of them are, my government is more predatory. It is built on force, which Google is not, actually.
Right.
They're built on providing goods and
But
services.
they do have the benefit of the state's use of force to limit competition, to give them certain immunities, to allow them to have favorable treatment, and which makes it much harder for upstarts to compete with them. I mean, this is what every big
And the
company does.
government, that's right. And because they have all these things, the government pays them gigantic amounts of money for the things that they have. So
Right.
get the government out of the picture. And I think this will all sort itself out. And anyway, Google can't put me in jail, okay? Or Google can't kill me. Well, of course, anybody can kill anybody. But those are things that the government does for a living. So the real danger, the real predator stalking the herd is the government, not these big corporations.
Okay. So someone asks about the media here. They say, they're curious what your take on the media is. To them, it's the institution that is degrading the fastest. And they say they're a Canadian living abroad, and it seems to them that the US is really taking the lead in that respect.
Yeah, look, you shouldn't believe anything that you hear on television or radio or anything else, because these people are just talking heads that are reading scripts that I don't know who writes. So there are millions and millions of things, many of them quite interesting and important, that are happening daily all around the world. But what do we hear about? 5 or 10 of them on a broadcast from MSNBC or Fox that are arbitrarily selected and arbitrarily emphasized. So the only reason I turn on the television is not to learn anything myself, because I don't really believe much of what I hear, certainly not the interpretation of what may be happening out there, assuming everything's not fabricated. So the only reason I turn these things on is to find out what other people are being exposed to and therefore may believe. So further proof we live in a matrix. Don't worry about it. Just turn off the damn TV, except when you want to find out what the other hoi polloi are being told to believe.
Right. I think, yeah, this goes to what we were talking about yesterday about being of the world or in the world, but not of it, I think is the expression you used. And I think that because the media, if you can, sometimes it's entertaining. If you like sports, people, I mean, why is sports so commercially successful for people? Why do people enjoy it so much and follow sports and get very seemingly, obsessive about sports? It seems because we like this like rivalry where there's just two forces competing against each other in a known contest where the rules are understood. And it seems there's something in our programming that likes that idea. And so when they frame, that's why they mostly frame politics in that way. And now it's obviously super contentious now. But I mean, even I remember when I first started paying attention to politics was during the Clinton administration, and everything was about who was ahead in the polls. It's like this horse race thing. So it was always tried to be put into the most simplistic terms possible about how red team was doing against blue team. It's just, it's
Yeah.
manipulative.
I know, it's actually quite ridiculous. I mean, I don't care what all these other people think. I just don't want them to be in a position to harm me or harm themselves for that matter.
Right.
It's the emphasis on this is crazy. I don't know what we can do about it. You have to change the psyche of every human being one by one. and clear out the irrationalities in their mind. And the situation is hopeless. But as we were talking about yesterday, it's probably not serious.
Not that
Don't worry
serious.
about it.
Though one last thought I had is I was just thinking about what you could really even do to change it. I'm sure you've seen the movie Fight Club.
Yeah, for
And,
sure.
and then the big thing they were trying to do was try and take out the credit bureaus, so that had the credit ratings for people. So they were trying to, that was the big goal essentially of this organization. It seems like if there was a way, in this case, essentially to knock out the media or the internet or something so that people actually had to go outside and they had to actually talk to their neighbor and they actually had to, I don't know, interact in the real world. Maybe that's the seed that's destroying it all. The information vacuums that we're all in. You know, if a
Or
new
like
Fight
that
Club were done.
movie, or like that movie from several decades ago, Network, where the guy's yelling out his window, "I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it
Take it
anymore."
anymore.
And maybe I've touched on it a little bit in our current novel, which has just been released. Go to Amazon and buy one, folks. You're going to love this novel. It's quite good, if I do say so myself. Assassin, where what we really need is 100 or 1,000 or 100,000, as in have gun will travel, out there solving problems as best they can in the most rational way they can, which could be anything from imparting a few words of wisdom to a couple of people that are in conflict to sometimes just shooting a bad guy. So maybe that's another solution.
Yeah. Good. Well, so I'm going to link to your book, of course, in this description. I'm also actually going to link to that whole Have Gun Will Travel series is on YouTube. People should watch it. It's good.
It's the best half-hour show that's ever been on television. Although there are competitors like Rod Serling's Twilight Zone and a few others, but no, Have Gun Will Travel was a work of genius in many ways.
Really was. Years ago, I had to buy it all on DVD, but now you can get it all on YouTube. So I encourage people to check it out that way. All right.
Great.
Thanks, Doug. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Fantastic, Matt. Because we'll have watched the debates.
Debates tonight. Yes. Should be interesting. I'm curious how many times Trump's microphone gets cut off.
Yeah, well, it'll be the nice thing about the way they're structuring it is that at least they won't be talking over each other. And if Biden has to ramble on for 2 minutes, he'll undoubtedly put his foot in his mouth. And maybe Trump will have an opportunity to ask questions about exactly what happened in the Ukraine and China with these tens of millions of dollars. And so it might be entertaining from that point of view, but it's not going to be like an interesting intellectual discussion. It's going to be just more bullshit about, I want to do this and I want to give you that, but still infotainment.
Infotainment. That's the best way to think of it. All right. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Matt.